Welcome to the Rust Belt Rundown, brought to you by Rust Belt Recruiting. This podcast is designed to shine a light on the meaningful work being done in Northeast Ohio and the surrounding region. We will convene manufacturing executives and Northeast Ohio business leaders for candid discussions about their business, regional happenings, industry trends, entrepreneurship, and more. Now, let's get running on the rundown.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 33 of the Rust Belt Rundown, a Rust Belt recruiting production. I am your host, Paul O'Connor, and on this episode, we are joined by Andy McCartney of Bowden Manufacturing. Andy, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be here.
All right, so first and foremost, it's March, so let's check in. Is your bracket still alive?
I run a pool. There's like 20 some of us. And you're allowed to do two of them, right? So I tell everybody, do what you think's going to happen and what you hope's going to happen. And so The good news is one of my brackets is in first place and one of them's in last place. And I'm not going to tell you which one's which.
I was going to say, is it the hope or the want? Which?
So the irony is it's the hope bracket right now. So my daughter graduated, my oldest graduated from Purdue. So I had them winning it all. And I think in that one I didn't have Kentucky going very far, and that seemed to have busted a lot of the other. So I thought Tennessee was going to do really well, and so I had them going to the final. I think I had them going to the finals in the one that what I thought was going to happen, and obviously that didn't turn out so well.
Yeah, I think it's one of those. I would love to hit a hole in one day in my life. I would love to have a perfect bracket. I don't know which one I'd rather have, but I don't think either are going to happen.
Well, considering the 14.5 million ESPN folks that did, there's none left. So
yeah, it's been a crazy tournament so far. But it's been.
What else is new, right? It's as usual. It's crazy.
Yeah, without a doubt. Cool. Well, listen, let's jump in. I just want to start with talking about your time in the U.S. Navy, and I want to specifically ask, how does working for a branch of our armed forces prepare you for life and business, right? Because truthfully, you're working on this side in a life and death scenario, not necessarily every single job, but you are working in one of those types of environments versus, you come to business and people may think it's life and death, but it isn't. So how does that prepare you for business and life's challenges?
Well, so I do think it gives you a little perspective on just what matters and the time sensitivity to stuff. I think it's fun. The best man in our wedding is still in the Navy. My older brother just retired, and so I've spent the last 20 some years. I've been out 23 years now, and staying in touch with folks that I know well, and talking about the differences and experience the difference between kind of the civilian world and the military. The opportunity to lead. So I'm not actually an engineer by trade, but I was a physics major. I got a master's in electrical engineering. But the opportunity to show up at a ship and all of a sudden you got a division of guys working for you, and less than anybody about the stuff that you now effectively own as a part of that ship. And so if you show up and you tell them, hey, it's my way or the highway, even though you don't know anything, you get one kind of response. And if you show up and say, hey guys, look, I'm responsible for all this stuff to the folks up the chain of command, and if you help me not look like an idiot to them, I'll do what I can to protect you and make sure we get to be in a good spot. And so they certainly appreciate that. When I got out of the Navy and came to Bowden, it wasn't a family business till I showed up. My dad was here, and so then it became kind of this family business because we were both there, and the only real training I had that was applicable was leadership training, and the opportunity to come in. Again, it wasn't rocket science. I had the same last name as the old man in the corner office, right? So we had a sense of where that was going, and yet I came in to learn, and once they see that you actually want to learn and you have some intellectual capacity to understand what's going on and hopefully help make it better. The team was very responsive to that, and that's every time you go to a new ship, you get a new bunch of folks that you got to start working with, and I think the benefit of being in the military is there's always somebody new. It's a rotational thing. So there, every 2 years, there's a new captain comes in. And so you expect that things are going to change. Whereas I've been here for 23 years and there's not typically something that says, okay, every 2 years, we're going to expect everything's going to have the potential to change. And so, the ups and downs and the events of the economy and the pandemic and these things coming at you now, there's outside impetuses to change. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase, never waste a good crisis. When stuff happens, I mean, in the military, you're doing the same stuff that was being done years and years and years and decades ago, because there's a tradition there, and yet there's nuanced changes that happen, and hopefully we get better. In the business world, you don't necessarily have those things that are forcing a change just by a turn of the calendar, because we're humans. We tend to do the same thing that we used to do, and how we evolve and change. It can be a challenging process. But so I think it's been a fun couple of decades out, and trying to apply some of those lessons. I think it's been helpful to me when I talk to folks about being in a control room running a couple nuclear power plants. There is life and death, and yet 95 to 99% of the time, it's not something that you're making these snap decisions and you're fighting a war all the time, right? But when I tell people, when I would sit with the guys in the control room and it's 3:00 in the morning because you're on watch, and I tell them, look, I'm going to try and explain what and why I'm asking you to do something, and yet if something happens and we need to respond now, you're going to hear the change in the tone of my voice. It's going to let you know, hey, something's going on here that we got to pay attention to. And it was funny. I had that conversation with the team, and about 2 weeks later, we're operating and we get an all back full emergency. And on an aircraft carrier, that typically means that a plane was supposed to take off with a catch shot and something happened and the plane went down in front of the boat. And so, all of a sudden, the environment changes almost instantly, because that just doesn't happen very often. It was the only time it ever happened to me, standing watching. And yet, the team responded. Obviously, my voice changed and we got a little more excited, and we executed what we need to do. It's not like your car where you just step on the brake. When you got a nuclear power plant, there's a few other things you got to do to make sure that something bad doesn't happen when you make an extreme speed change like that. And so it was, again, it's hey, we did it, we adjusted, and then afterwards we talked about it. Hey, everybody did what they were supposed to do. We all respond. We're trained early on in the service, and you hear boot camp, and you want to be able to obey commands and execute, but also keep your brain engaged, so that you're looking to make sure something's happening and that we're not making a big mistake. And so it was a great experience. I think, there's a part of me that thinks, hey, all of us should have the opportunity to go through boot camp and understand what it's like to be in a disciplined mode. I had 3 daughters who had zero interest in going in, and maybe it was mostly just because they were going to have to get their hair cut pretty short and they didn't want to think about that. But, they got a chance to see the Naval Academy and see some of the places that we've been, and they were really still pretty young when I got out. So, they didn't get vivid memories, where my older brother's kids, they moved around the world with him. He had, stationed in Hawaii, stationed in Japan, and so they got some other experiences. So, it's not just a job, it's an adventure, they say, right? In the old commercials. Yeah. It's true.
Yeah. I wanted to get your thoughts on a quote that relates to all of this. And the quote is, individual glory is often believed to be the best marker of success, but it is cooperation and teamwork that usually wins the day in your professional life. I think and I'll say we as the United States of America, we've been programmed to, it's about you, it's about individual success, it's about your next promotion, it's about what you do, what you bring. And there's now books, all about this, and that basically are trying to shift that. Yeah, that's not bad. Individual success is by no means bad, and you should always be striving to do your best and do better. But I think what they're now seeing is that the people that cooperate the best are actually achieving more than people that are just dead set on me, mine, I. So the question is, would you agree with that? And then if so, how does this play into the culture that, you've developed? I mean, you take over for your dad, and like, how do you instill that type of culture?
Well, so I certainly agree that it's true. And I mean, as a fellow basketball junkie, right? I mean, basketball and at the elite level, there's only 5 people on the court, and we certainly celebrate individual success. I mean, I was watching the Buckeyes, so as an Ohio guy, watching a little of the Buckeyes game, and the commentator made the comment, hey, in the first 20 some field goals, there were only 2 assists, right? A lot of one-on-one basketball. Well, they're not in the tournament anymore, and they, essentially, hey, against a team that plays really good defense, you can't go one-on-one because you end up going 1-on-2, and that's when bad things happen, right? And my favorite basketball coach of all time, guy by the name of Wooden, that most of I heard about, and he didn't want any stars anywhere, right? And yet he developed some of the greatest that ever played the game, but he did it because they were all there to function as a team. And yes, he wanted to get their best out of them, but in the function of a team. And I think, the opportunity for us to celebrate, and there's a selfishness that I think is unfortunately most represented in basketball, where how many points did I get? And versus the sports that have more people there, a pitcher knows he can't win a World Series by himself. Mm-hmm. Even a position player can't. And Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback that's ever played. He didn't make the Super Bowl this year, right? Because it takes a team to get it done. And so the unfortunate reality of our celebritizing of everything these days makes us think that that's the height of our success. And yet in the reality, it's such a small percentage of people that are doing that. And you don't see the behind the scenes work that's being done as a part of the team. And we know that if we're just all about ourselves, we don't get any help. And if you don't get any help, there's not teamwork involved. It's really hard to go very far and be very successful. So no, I definitely agree with that quote and that mindset. And here, it's a team sport, and everybody's got a part to play. And from me out trying to sell, get new customers, to setting a vision for our team, down through every single person who's doing it. And truly, when I think of an organizational chart, I've got it inverted where I've got my direct reports. I'm trying to support and make sure that they have everything they need to be successful, and that their mission is, we got these machines behind me, and obviously on a podcast, maybe you can't see that, but we got to keep those machines going, which means we got to support the people who are operating them as best we can, make sure they know what they're doing, what needs to be done, and they're out there doing what feels in a lot of cases like rote stuff, and yet they've got to engage their brain and work together. And a team, in this environment, it's really easy to go, look, I've got my machine, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
And yet a better approach is, hey, there's a group of us that have machines pretty close by, and we can help each other out to maximize the output of the machines all together and be more successful as a team, because our customers are counting on us. They're counting us to make good parts. They're counting us to make them on time. And the better we can do that, and the more cost effectively we can do that as a team, the better it is going to be for everybody.
Yeah, it's a fine line, right? Like, you want to reward individual success, but I think, especially if you're in sales, right? Just traditional sales, and you have a base and you have commission, right? It's just you and your world, and it's what I sold, and what I killed, and what I got, and this is me. And I think, a lot of people say, well, no, but yeah, we're a team or a family. And it's like, well, how do you reward your people, right? Like, is there a team aspect? And I think that's one of those ways you can shift it is, what if in a crazy world, the sales team got rewarded if the customer success team upsold something, and like, it was like this person's success actually got rewarded over here, and vice versa, that would be. And I think we're getting there with a lot of people. They're looking at it, right? The last 2 years has completely shifted how we think about a million things.
Well, and we don't have commission salespeople. We have guys that are part of the team, and they're in the sales team, and hey, we got to go sell stuff. We know that the irony is the salesperson getting an extra dollar or two on a price to sell to somebody, or the guy on the shop floor realizing, hey, if I use a different tool here, I can save 2 minutes off the cycle.
Yeah.
They're both getting a savings. They're both helping add to the bottom line. They're potentially both helping the customer get what they need. And yet, should we compensate one just because he happens to be the one, or she happens to be the one that's the one who is given or has that relationship?
Yeah.
So it's not, that's, we just don't do that anymore, because it isn't a team. It is a team effort, and we got to compensate and reward in that fashion.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about at great lengths on this podcast about the challenges that companies have seen over the past 2 years in terms of recruiting, retention, hiring, just workforce in general. So what has the last 2 years looked like for you, and then how have you either shifted or adjusted to remain competitive to what people are looking for nowadays?
Well, it's funny because we in manufacturing, we feel like we've been having this crisis of workforce for about a decade, and the rest of the world suddenly realized that, holy mackerel, it's hard to find workers. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. But we started about a decade ago where we stopped using the word machinist when we were going, especially into the high schools and colleges, because frankly, the kids didn't have any association with it, but their parents did, right? And so the idea of a
generational thing.
Yeah, and the parents heard the word machinist, and they heard people in our industry saying, no, you could get a good job, and you can make some good money. And who wants to just do good, right? And who wants to just say, okay, there's the ceiling, and I'm going to go run a machine for 30 years, and that's good. Okay, well, I don't want good for my kid. I want great for my kid. And so we started using the word engineer and a manufacturing engineer, and all of a sudden now the parents are like, well, shoot, yeah, I want my kid to be an engineer. And I asked the question because we had actually hired a young engineer, and he was working in our quality department, and we were sitting in a room, and I had a machinist who had been with us for 8 years, and I had fresh out of Miami of Ohio engineer been with us about 3 months. And I said, okay, who would we refer to more as a manufacturing engineer? My 3 months out of college or my 8 years on the shop floor guy? And it was a pretty easy answer, right? The guy who's been setting up and running machines, developing processes, doing this, way more manufacturing engineering knowledge than my fresh out of college 3 months, young man. Smart young man, very capable, but he didn't have nearly the experience of my 8-year guy in the building. And so ironically, trying to have our machinists wrap their brains around the fact that they're actually manufacturing engineers, and that they can think of themselves as in that way, and wanting to develop their skills instead of just thinking, okay, I'm pushing a button and I'm making a part. But I got to engage my brain to think about, hey, how are we doing this? Why are we doing this way? Is there a way we can do things better? At the same time, we started what we now refer to as our next gen project 6 years ago. And we hired our first degreed engineer to come and work on the shop floor. And Nate is still with us 6 years later, a Case kid. And, we sold him on this idea of, they're all brainwashed. So taking half a step back, when I was at the Naval Academy in the Navy, you're brainwashed that you want to have command of something one day, right? You got to have command of a ship. You got to have a command of a squadron. You got to have command of something, because they're teaching leadership, and that's the highest form of leadership, is to have command of something. I used to kid my older brother that I got my command first because I got out of the Navy, came here, took over running the company before he got his first ship. He had 3 ships, so he wasn't too worried about it later, but that was our little joke. But so the mechanical engineers, by and large, they're brainwashed that they want to be design engineers one day, right? They've learned these skills. They want to design cool stuff that's going to, solve the world's problems, make cool stuff, and make some money doing it, right? And so the challenge is when they graduate, they have very little knowledge about how stuff actually gets made. Yeah. And so we say, look, there's 2 main ways that you can learn. The normal way to learn to be a design engineer is you go to a company that has a bunch of them. They're in cubicles usually. You go sit in the cubicle next to one of them. You watch what he does or she does. And at some point pretty early on, they give you a piece of paper and say, okay, go design this. Now, the kids these days, the students, they can do 3D CAD like breathing, right? Us old guys, I'm 51. I mean, for me to try and manipulate 3D CAD is a stretch, a big stretch, and I feel like I'm fairly computer savvy. These kids do it like nothing. The problem is they have no idea what to make the machine do. But so you say, okay, go design this. So they can design it, and then they take it down to the shop, and they say to the shop person, hey, I need to make this part I just designed. And the shop person says, what are you doing? You can't make that part. And if they find a nice one, they say, okay, you got to fix this, you got to change this tolerance, you got to change this feature. And so, of course, the student, that brand new engineer takes that drawing back up in 30 seconds, has made all the changes, and are right back down the shop. How about now? Perfect. And so you do that 10 to 20 to 50 times, and suddenly you become a design engineer, because all the stuff you designed and then you take it out to actually get made, you've had to go through the iterative process to make it manufacturable. Where our process is, hey, come here, we will get you dirty, teach you how to make stuff, so that when it comes time to design something, you'll actually know what a tolerance is, the difference between ±2 on a 1/2 inch diameter or a 3 inch diameter. Well, there's a big difference. And I can say those numbers out loud, and it wouldn't make sense that there's a difference. If you've held ±2 on a 3 inch diameter for 8 hours, you will never casually put a tight tolerance on the drawing again, right? Because you've fought that for 8 hours. It's a pain in the butt. The only time you'll do it is if you absolutely need it. And preferably you're trying to design your way out of it, because you don't want it to have to be that tight. And so having them have that very practical experience very quickly puts them in a spot where they have a lot more confidence of what they're doing when they get into that design mode. So that process, so we've been up as high as 18 degreed engineers running machines. I think right now we have about 12. And that's part of that Navy mindset, right? So when I went to my first ship, I took over for a guy who had been there 2 years. I was there for just under 2 years, and then another person came along and they took the job. I went to the next school and the next bigger job. And the opportunity for us, our industry, we tend to want to have somebody come in, and if we're going to put any training time and energy into them, we want them to stay for life. When was the last time you talked to somebody under age 25 that even could commit to doing anything for 5 years, let alone 5 minutes, right? I mean, yep. I have 3 daughters in their 20s. It is not their normal mindset, right? I mean, we say, look, do our program. It's about 2 to 3 years, and that will put you in a spot where you can have options either within the building or with outside the building. And because I grew up, if you will, in that Navy mindset where, hey, if we could get 2 to 3 years out of somebody, that would be a win for them, because they're going to leave a confident engineer. It'd be a win for us because we've had an opportunity to have them engage with us and be a part of our machining force, especially in a zone where it's really hard to find people to do it.
So let's jump into Bowden and what you guys manufacture and what industries do you primarily serve?
So going into the pandemic, we did a lot of aerospace. We've always done a lot of defense, and obviously when the pandemic hit, this industry that goes kind of steady growth forever took a dive, right? I mean, nobody was flying, and several of our customers laid 80+% of their workforce off. And so a year and a half later, so 4 to 6 months ago, they were starting to try to build back their workforces. And, with everybody trying to find people, it's been a challenging thing for them to get their supply chains and themselves back in a reasonable spot. The defense stuff has been kind of the staple for our company for decades. And so we deal with some of the bigger defense contractors, General Dynamics and the like. And so that's kind of stayed steady throughout the pandemic. One area we got into kind of as an offshoot from that, we did get into the commercial gun market about 10 years ago now. So making parts for rifles. And so during the pandemic, that market went a little crazy. And so it went from being, I think, 22% of us up to about 83% of us for a while, which was partly because we contracted with aerospace going totally away, but we committed a lot more resources. We more than doubled the rifle business that we were doing. We developed our own product line. Bowden Tactical is a separate entity for us now for sales and marketing purposes primarily. But so that business has continued to be a big part of what we're doing. But so a lot of industrial stuff, mostly regionally. We do have a couple, customers as far as Texas and up in the New England states, and but predominantly it's regionally, Cleveland area, Columbus area, Chicago. So it's pretty wide range. My line always was wide range of industries, wide range of raw materials. We do a lot of net shape stuff, so extrusions, castings, forging stuff, which it takes a little extra engineering work to hang on to a casting or a forging or extrusion than just having plate stock. And so that's kind of the breadth of what we do.
Awesome. So talk to me, I mean, you said 10 years, was it 10 years ago you got into the arms and like the tactical, 10 years ago you started that?
It was, about 10 years ago.
Okay. So what does 2030 look like? Will you have a completely different thing that you guys are manufacturing that you have no idea? Or is it like, oh, we could see ourselves going there?
So that's an interesting question. The one thing I think that we learned the most out of this tactical experience is that having our own product line, it's one of those things where when you're a total contract manufacturer, as we were since inception, it's one of those grass is always greener on the other side. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just make for inventory and we could have design, control and all that stuff. And while it's not all it's cracked up to be, finding the right product and digging in, we've learned a lot about kind of business to business and business to direct to consumer marketing that has been new for us. And I think, kind of sinking our teeth into that marketplace and then expanding into it has been a great experience for us. We do have a couple projects kind of on the slow R&D path that could turn into larger pieces of the enterprise and could ultimately either be spun off or be something that just kind of takes a life of its own. So there is definite appeal to adding to our product line. I think we're playing into this one, and yet the challenge with this market, this tactical market, is very volatile, right? I mean, it is up and down. So having spent a lot of our years doing defense and aerospace work that's fairly consistent, kind of year over year stuff, to the stuff that is oscillating really rapidly, almost feels like at times week to week. That's just it doesn't help you sleep well at night all the time when it's down, and when it's up, again, it feels great that you're behind because you got so much to do that you can't keep up. And yet, you got to do it while you can, because the market's just as likely to turn tomorrow as it was to get to where it is. So I think 2030, my hope is that we would have diversified a little bit more. It feels like there's size thresholds that we're in that 8 to 10 million range right now in sales, and I think getting up in the 12 to 15 zone here in the next couple of years, and to see kind of where that takes us. But I could definitely see getting another product line in a different industry that could help offset the volatility of the tactile world that we're spending time in would be an opportunity for us. And it's hard to see. I think the opportunity to grow young manufacturing professionals is a big part of what we're doing, and help them to understand how we can service a customer, how we can really develop the best manufacturing process, and that has to go outside the scope of just what goes on in this building, right? We have to look at the entire chain of what's happening from how our vendors are doing what they're doing to serve, support us, as well as how is the customer using this part. And when you have a young engineer who sees a piece part component, and you can translate that into, hey, what does it go into at the next stage, and how can we go visit our customer and see how they're using it, and talk with their team and see, hey, how could we make this more manufacturable that would ultimately provide the best total value for the entire supply chain and ultimately for the end user. And in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of talk about reshoring stuff and bringing it back. And I think we know that we have to continue to get better. As an American manufacturer, if we want to make that reshoring thing actually make financial sense. We've talked about it in a couple different areas, right? Where the incentive is driving, we all want to say, hey, we'd love to make everything in America, and yet we have to go spend our money on products. And if the products aren't competitively priced, there's only so much we'll do to buy something that's made in America versus something that's significantly less expensive of what I'll call comparable quality. Yep. Most of the consumer goods that we see in the store, a significant percentage of them are made overseas because they're so much cheaper than what we can do in this country. And yep. Is that real? Okay, some of it's real, but we know the entire state of the world economy, prices are going up, and it's partly because people are starting to get kind of forced to have a living wage everywhere in the world, and that's just going to take all the prices up. And so, for us to think our way into more cost-effective ways of doing stuff, and so I know our young idealistic engineers are excited to figure out, hey, how do we solve some of these problems? And I certainly want to fan that flame and give them the opportunity to talk with our customers, find out, hey, how are you using this? Are there ways we could try and do it different and better that might take some costs out of the equation while providing the same or even better output and value for the end user when they're doing their stuff?
Yep. Okay, so normally this question alone could take an entire podcast episode. So we'll try and keep it to, a word or a sentence for each. But if you were to provide a SWOT analysis on the state of Ohio and manufacturing, what would that look like?
I think the strengths that we have, our industrial supply base is really tremendous. I mean, you can get most anything, regionally, certainly. We've done some projects with some folks out, in the further, I guess it starts to feel west from us because we're on the east side of the Midwest, but, out in Nevada and some of the places that are a little more remote, and they can't get raw materials the way we can get them. They can't get the same services. They certainly don't have nearly as many options. So our industrial supply base is a significant strength that we have, and the opportunity to have both machine tools and the 3D printing research and stuff that's going on. I mean, there's zero question in my mind that as that evolves and gets more cost effective and the aerospace industry has some really strict regulations because they don't want planes falling out of the sky, and yet that technology, if they can really work to do some of the more complicated aerospace parts in a 3D printing environment, they're just tough parts, and that's a great avenue to do them, but it feels like they're still maybe an order of magnitude or two away from being able to do that. But so a lot of that research is going on in our region, and it's exciting stuff. The weaknesses, I think, we've struggled as a region, and it's because we have so much manufacturing here in particular that, it's hard to get competitors to come together to do something together. And I think the stigma of manufacturing still exists. As I said, we don't want to think of ourselves as machinists, and it forces us to think of ourselves as engineers before it starts feeling socially acceptable to ourselves. And I don't sign on to that belief, because I think we have a bunch of folks that want to work with their hands, love working with their hands, and they're doing what they love. And I'm excited to have them. I want them to keep learning and growing, but I think the challenge of how do we get actual competitors in the marketplace to come together as a region to do some successful stuff, that is a challenge. And so it feels like we've really struggled to do that, especially the way the government flows funds and resources between Cleveland and Akron and Canton. I mean, it's how much is regional, how much is local, and I'm sure every place has that, but there's been a lot of efforts to try and to work together, and it felt like a struggle to me. The opportunities, I think, we have tremendous ability to be competitive with other regions of the country because our cost of living is so reasonable. And now having the pandemic to expand kind of the remote workforce potential, where people they can live in a nice weather place during the winter of Cleveland and still be functional. Obviously on the manufacturing floor, you kind of have to be here, but there's a lot of other work that's done in our world that could be done remotely. And there's just, we do a ton of great manufacturing, and there's a lot of impetus and effort to build on that I think is a big opportunity for us, especially in light of, just how affordable it is relative to some of the bigger metropolitan areas, especially on the coast and in Chicago. And then the threats, there is always change is hard in that sense that we're going to rest on this is how we've always done it, and that's a hard one to break. And I think we've been fortunate in having so many people under the age of 25 in our building that they're always looking to try and figure out. You almost have to hold them back and to say, okay, we can try anything, but we also do have to do some stuff to pay the bills, and we can't we can't abandon everything that we've learned just because we want to try something new. And so that's that balance that we have to walk. But the threat that we face of becoming obsolete, because too many of us want to just kind of, hey, this is how I do it, and if they don't like that, then so be it. And I think the other aspect in manufacturing, a lot of small businesses at 51, I'm on the younger age of the spectrum of folks that are running kind of the small to medium sized manufacturing businesses, and the next generation piece, which is why we named our project the Next Generation Project, to get new young folks to understand and appreciate and know what manufacturing is about. I think there's a lot of folks that are, they're wanting to retire, but they're not sure what they're going to do with their business. And so I don't have a good feel for what that's going to mean in the next 15 or 20 years. But there's definitely some feeling of threat to that we could lose some of the knowledge and skills, even in just the more experienced machinists that we have. There's machines that are not really being run anymore because people, the skill set to run them is gone. And we're figuring out ways around that as an industry, but there's definitely concern. And that's, coming back to that recruiting and, the last 2 years, well, for us, it's been the last 10 years of, hey, where is that next wave of manufacturing folks going to come from? So it's not easy.
Yeah. And we talk about it all the time, upskilling, right? Like, you may have done something for 3 to 4 years and you need to transition, or the machine is new, or, there's a new technology out there that now we have to adapt to. And so should that be more on the company you currently work for, or should companies have a partner that comes in, trains them up, and now they're good to go? Like, where does that responsibility lie? Maybe both.
Well, I do think it's a shared responsibility. I think the other thing, and it's funny, for those of us who listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of interviews of highly successful people, and almost to a person, they will talk about being a lifelong learner, about wanting to continue to engage. And it's funny when you spend time listening to interviews and stuff on podcasts with those folks, you get normalized to that mindset, and yet that's not a normal mindset, right? We're conditioned as a society to fill spots in what is the industrialized world, right? We are building spots for somebody to come in and push a button and make a part, and we've built this system, and we really, the old mindset of that was just, hey, come in and do this job, don't make any drama, just do this, and we'll sell it as, hey, it's a good job. Again, it comes back to, hey, that's a good job, and you can come do this mindless activity for 8 hours and go away. Well, that's not what I would want to do, and yet our society kind of, once you get to age 25 or 30, you either decided to go to college or not, and now you've kind of found your spot, and the thought that you could continue to grow starts to get beaten out of you, right? And as a young kid, maybe you were like me saying, hey, I want to play in the NBA one day. Well, I stopped growing, and actually I was never that big in the first place. So the opportunity, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Well, that didn't mean I couldn't still want to be involved or in part of a basketball zone. Now, I've done some coaching, very low level stuff, but the opportunity to continue to learn and grow is something that I take for granted because I want to do it, and yet that's not normal. And so we offer a tremendous amount of training to our team. We do have some outside folks, and again, it's a combination of the desire and drive and example that we provide as leaders, as well as facilitating stuff. And there's some time, and if you've been a part of a family where there was forced fun, where, hey, guess what, we're going to go do this, right? And you get the whining and complaining, and yet then you go and everybody has a good time, right? And so we set up learning opportunities when everybody's like, oh, I can't believe I got to do it. And then you get in the room, and as long as you have engaging training, they're like, man, that was actually pretty useful. That was pretty helpful. Yeah. And so you kind of have to force some of it. And of course, that means you got to pay for some of it. And it's best if they have a little invested in it, some skin in the game. But trying to encourage them, look, if you can continue to learn, the sky is the limit for you. And that's not a societal norm, right? It's just not. And I once heard somebody talking about, we've worked to do all this stuff efficiently so that we can do what with that extra time. So we can sit and watch Netflix and vegetate our brains, right? And so if that's all it's about doing, well, then it's really hard to say, hey, let's get better at this so that we can just vegetate more, right? Yeah. That's not aspirational, but encouraging, and we love having young folks in the building because they still are maybe ideological enough to want to continue to learn and grow, and we tell them they can, and they believe it. And we know that if you have a mechanical engineering degree, you're not really coming here to run machines for the rest of your life. You're coming here to gain some knowledge and experience that then can translate into designing manufacturing processes for us or somebody. And so it's a journey. They can see the path of growth in front of them. And I think too often, we've set up these big manufacturing facilities for some, we need to plug some cogs into the machine as people, and we will give some lip service to wanting them to grow. I remember a number of years ago asking a friend of mine, okay, so wait, let me get this straight. So I said, do you really want your people to get go to school and get a degree? And their answer was, well, I want them to learn. I want them to learn more stuff. But if they go ahead and get the degree, then they're going to want to get a degree position from me. And then I don't know who's going to fill their spot on the shop floor. And so I laughed. I said, okay, so wait, that means you want them to learn and grow just enough to stay where they are until you retire, not until they retire, until you retire, and then you don't have to worry about that issue anymore, right? Well, that unfortunately, you can't have that mindset around wanting them, giving lip service to wanting them to grow, but then not really wanting them to grow and not really celebrating them when they do. And again, it's, hey, you always hate to lose somebody that you've poured into, and yet if you can celebrate them and use them as an example of the people coming behind, it says, hey, this is what you can do if you apply yourself and you do well in this place, is you have opportunity that you didn't have. And even convincing our young teammates that, look, it's not about doing the minimum. it's about going to do as much as you can with what you've been given. I mean, and that's, again, it comes back to Coach Wooden on, look, we want to reach to meet our potential as best we can, and have that peace of mind that says, hey, we did all we could with what we had.
Yep. That's a good way to put a bow and a ribbon on this episode. But and this has been great. Before we get you out of here, I always say the same thing every episode. Sometimes it's the hardest question, but talk to me about your favorite restaurant in Cleveland. I have now been learning. So I'm from the East Coast. I've lived in Columbus now for two years, which is crazy to say. I'm now learning how big of a divide Cleveland is, East versus West. I mean, I'm like, wait a minute. It's just right here though. Like, there's great stuff. It is a big deal.
You meet somebody. So you meet somebody from Cleveland out on vacation, right? You're out west and you meet somebody. Hey, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Cleveland. Where do you live?
Where?
Rocky River. Oh, yeah, I'll never see you again.
Yeah. And what?
Because I live in Highland Heights. I'm never going to be over there. It's crazy. It's crazy.
What is it? What is it?
I have no idea. It's just, I mean, obviously it's been that way my whole life. It just is. And it's crazy. I totally acknowledge. I don't know my way around the West Side at all. I just don't.
So you're the East Sider. So
I'm the East Side.
All East Side restaurant recommendations.
Absolutely. So no, I mean, our go-to is Sara's Place in Gates Mills. Now it's not fair because we know the owners, but it's just, I mean, I've never had a bad meal there. I mean, it's right down the street from where I grew up, and it hasn't been there nearly that long, but they ran Gavi's in Willoughby, which is another East Side spot, very close to where we are here in Willoughby. And then they opened Sara's Place, and my daughter babysat for Sara back when she was a kid, so we've known them a long time. But just a phenomenal restaurant. So that's definitely our go-to. Trying to think what other fun places. Nothing's really. I mean, again, that's if we got a night. That's where we're going.
That's where you're going. Nice. I love it. Yeah, no, I mean, the East versus West, it's real deal. Well, listen, Andy, this was great. I really appreciate you coming on. Enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure we'll have you on again soon and kind of check in. And but we wish you the best of luck this year, and we'll talk with you soon.
Awesome, and hey, hope your bracket did your bracket hold up?
No. I have two of my Final Fours already gone. I mean, It's just on day one I ripped it up. I haven't looked since. I just knew it was over. Just, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy the games and forget about it.
There you go. Yeah, I have a nephew at Auburn, so they were obviously very disappointed. But so no, there's nothing like sitting down and having. So Thursday night, there'll be bunch of games to watch, and it's amazing how often they come down to that last couple minutes, and that's the good stuff, right? To see who's going to do what. It's super fun. No, hey, I appreciate the time, Paul, and great to be on with you.
Yeah, of course. All right, we'll talk with you soon. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Rust Belt Rundown. Make sure you check us out at rustbeltrecruiting.com. The Rust Belt Rundown is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and click on 5 stars if you enjoyed this episode. See you next time.